Hello crafters and welcome back to the ScrapbookPal YouTube channel. My name is Deepa Robbins from DeeZinesByD, and today I have two Slimline cards to share with you featuring a ton of Pinkfresh Studio products. Now, the main products we're going to be focusing on today are the Pinkfresh Studio Daisy Slimline Frame. And this product comes as a clear stamp, as I'm showing you here. There's a bunch of cute little sentiments that you can add as well. There's a coordinating die that helps you cut out the little frame there. And then there's also a 6-piece layering stencil set, and this helps you color in the frame as well. I will be also using the Catherine Pooler Spa Collection inks here. That's the Zen Garden set. I've also got my Pinkfresh Studio Curvy Leaves dies and the mini Slimline Builder frame set here from Pinkfresh Studio as well. This is really cool because it helps you just build up a nice little background on your card. I've also got some foam tape there, some blending brushes, which will come in handy for the stenciling. And I've got these Sizzix sequins and beads sets. Now, I have a few to choose from, but I won't be using all of them. I've also got the Best Wishes foil plate and the die from Pinkfresh Studio, and I'll be using those as well. So the first thing I want to do is to cut up some white cardstock. I'm using just an 8.5 by 11 piece, and I'm just cutting it in half. Now, I like the extra space. You don't need it to be this big. You can cut it down to size if you want. But in the end, just do what works for you. So here I have the stencils. In the top left corner, it's hard to kind of see there. They've labeled the stencils 1 through 6, which is just kind of like a guide. You might want to use it in that order. You don't have to. And there's also some little guide marks to line up your paper if you wanted to make it to size. Now there's 2 of each part of the flower. There's 2 stencils for like an open face of the flower and then a detail one. There's an open face and then a detail of the leaves, and the same thing for the centers of the flower. So 6 stencils total. Now here's an idea. I have the MISTI here, and all you need is something that kind of has like a corner like this, and you could actually use your MISTI to kind of line up your stencils in the corner here. And by doing this, you're basically lining them up exactly right every time by sticking them in the corner. If you have the larger MISTI, that would work. I happen to have the original, so that's not really going to work for me, so I'll just kind of eye it. So for the first color, I'm going to be using the Sea Foam, which is the lightest green out of this Catherine Pooler Zen Garden ink pad pack. And I have got to say, this is my first time using Catherine Pooler inks, and they are phenomenal. Usually with some other ink pads, it's kind of hard to get the ink off the pad to then get it onto your brush to do your stenciling, but this comes right on the brush very easily. I don't have to press too hard either, and it just makes the whole stenciling process much easier. I definitely do recommend getting these ink pads because they work great with stenciling. So anyways, let's move along here. I've done the detailed portion of the leaf with now the spruce colored ink, which is the darker green. So that works out perfectly fine for me. And I like to kind of wipe down my stencil before I remove it, especially where you have dark inks like this and it's a lot to kind of take off all at once. It just stops you from getting that ink all over the place. So now I've lined up the third stencil, which is the open part of the flower. And I'm actually masking off some of the areas that are for the flowers that look just a little bit different. They look like they're more like on a vine, and that they look a bit more like a laurel versus having like the daisy look. So I've masked those off because I'm going to end up doing those in a different color. For the actual daisies, I'm going to be using the polished ink, and I'm going to show you here that you don't need to have various tones of inks to get a layered look. So I'm only going to be using one color for both of the flowers. So I'm going to be using the polished, and then I'm going to use sugared lavender for the other pieces. So what I've done here is with that first layer of the flower, the polished ink, I put that on a little lighter than I normally would. It still looks pretty dark here because, as I told you, that ink pad is super saturated. Now I've moved my masked tape, and I've opened up the areas where those laurel looking leaves are, and I'll be using the sugared lavender ink with a smaller brush to get those little areas. So this is how I get like 2 different colors for one stencil, and you could totally do the same, choose different colors. You could just use the same color if you wanted, but I just wanted a bit of variation in color. And again, that's the first layer. I put down the color very lightly. Now I've lined up the detailed section, or the detail stencil, and I'm putting down that lavender ink again, but I'm putting it down much heavier. You can see sometimes I'm doing it twice, and this is what's going to give me the darker tone on that lighter tone that we created earlier, but with the same ink. Now I'll do the exact same thing, and I'll just do that with the polished ink, and again, I'm going to put down that detailed area much heavier than I did the first layer. And you'll see once I take this off, you get the perfect look of a two-tone layered stencil, and you don't need more inks. So this is a great way to save some time, some money, and as I told you, these ink pads, I'm really stunned. So anyways, as I'm showing you here, you can see you get that two-tone look. You see I got the two tones with the polished and with the lavender. So that worked out perfectly. Now I just have the centers of the flowers to do. So I'm going to get another brush, and I'm going to be using the Shea Butter now to do the little centers of the flowers. Now these are very easy because there's only about like 6 or 7 of them. The first layer, again, I'll do it very lightly, which really, as I said, there's a ton of ink on these pads. I love it. So I take that off, and then I'll put the detailed stencil on, and then I'll do this just a little bit more with a heavier hand, and I get that darker yellow on there. And I'm going to get that two-tone look that just works so very well with these layering stencils. So now that I'm done, this is what the final frame looks like. Pretty cool, huh? So I just wanted to show you a couple tricks here. Now, if you have a bottle, this just has water in it. I just have water. I don't have any rubbing alcohol right now, but what you could do is actually mix a bit of rubbing alcohol with your water, and then you spritz that on your stencils, and that actually really helps you remove all of the color. Now, I personally found that with the Catherine Pooler inks, they seem to come off pretty easily, but some inks don't come off so easily, or if you leave them for a bit longer, it's a bit harder to get off. And you'll notice that the edges, especially with the darker colored inks, like those reds and purples, they stain. So here's my little trick. I just use some sanitizer, which is, I'm sure, a staple in everybody's home by now. And it really just gets off all of that extra little staining on the edges of your stencil. Now, I did this twice because I'm going to need 2 of these frames. And what I'm going to have to do is cut out the frame now. So I have this coordinating die. It's a nice large one-piece die, and it's pretty easy to line up here. So once I've kind of lined it up with my frame, I'll just tape it in place with a bit of washi tape, and then I'll put it through my die cutting machine. So once I have that cut out, that bottom, the center just pops out pretty easily, and you got this beautiful frame. Now the next thing I'm going to do is cut out my card base. So I'm kind of just lining this up with my card base and creating just about a 1/8 of an inch border. And then I'll cut off the end, and I will score the center of my cardstock at the desired size. I fold it up and make sure that I've got a nice crease with my, well, I just use my scoring tool. You guys probably have a nice bone folder. And then I will line this up, and it works out perfectly with my card. So that's normally how I create my card bases. I don't always measure them, but just so you know, I think that card base is about 3 3/4 by 8.5 inches. So now I've got this piece of acetate. So this has to be used to create my window, right? To keep all of my little pieces in for my shaker card. So I just attached that with some Tombow mono tape dispenser there. It's just the dot runner. And now I've got my phone tape. Now, if you wanted, you could just cut out a whole bunch of frames with the frame builder set and just stack those up and glue those together, and that creates your little window and your little well. But for me, I'm going to use the foam tape because this is just a little bit easier for me. And I'm actually just going to use the width of the tape on the 2 sides, and then on the top and bottom, I'm cutting the tape in half because I need it to be a little bit smaller. You can see that window opens just a little bit closer to the edge. So I just want to make sure that my foam tape doesn't show through the acetate. And I've also gone ahead and cut out all of these little curvy leaves with those curvy leaves dies from some vellum. So this is just going to add a little bit of interest on my card when I get to it. Now, before I put the shaker together, I've got to kind of put that card base together and make sure that it doesn't move because I don't want all my little pieces to go flying everywhere. So I just use a bit of washi tape to tape that together. And here's another trick that I've learned is that if you want your little sequins and bits to kind of show even when they're kind of sitting out all at the bottom and your card is upright, all you have to do is glue down some of your little sequins in the background so that they're still showing when your card is upright. So once I've got that glued to the back there and just dried a little bit, I'll add some of these seed beads. So I'm using the rose gold and the silver seed beads here, and you can see it's creating quite a mess. I've got to try and keep all of that in the center there. The other way you could do this is to put all of the sequins and the beads into the actual well that you created with the acetate frame and the foam tape there. But I wanted to do it this way because I want my frame to line up perfectly on front of the card because I'm going to have that 1/8 of an inch border. So I've put all these little sequins and the beads, which are from those Sizzix sets that I showed you in the beginning. And now I'm going to take the tape off of my foam and attach this right in the center of the front of my card on my card base. And there you go. You can see you got all these beautiful shiny little shaker bits in the center. And even though some of them fall to the bottom, some of them still show in the center. Now here's the second frame. I'm actually taking my scissors and I'm doing some fussy cutting. And I'm actually going to cut out some of the little daisy and flower images to kind of pop up on the front of my card to create another 2D layer, another 3D layer. Now, before I put everything kind of together on the front, I'm going to stamp out my sentiments. So this is from the stamp set. It's got a cute little encouraging sentiment there. And I'll just cut those down to size. I stamped them out with some VersaFine Onyx Black on some light purple cardstock here. And then I'm just going to attach them to the front of my card with a bit more foam tape. So this is just creating a lot more of a 3D look to it. I've got the 3D look with the shaker card, and I've got the 3D look going with the little sentiments popped up here. And then I'm just going to add another little facet of 3D, and that's going to be all of those little images that I cut out. So I'm using some more foam squares here. This is the variety pack. It has 2 different sizes in it, which I like. And I'm just gonna kind of arrange those little curvy leaves. I'll put a piece of, I'll put a foam square on top, and then I'll put one of the pieces that I cut out on top of that. And I'll continue in this fashion around the frame of my card just to create a bit more interest. And you'll see that those little wispy leaves create just a nice flowy effect and a bit more interest on the front of your card. Now, for the most part, most of those pieces I put down right on top of where they would go based on the background frame. But for some of them, I put them kind of off in different ways so that they're not directly on top of the leaf that they're supposed to be on top of. And that actually gave a good look as well. You can see I did that with that little lavender piece there, and it actually looks really nice, creating more of a 3D effect and just kind of another layer or a bit of a foreground for the rest of that frame. Now, as always, I have to add some bling to my cards, so I'm adding some of these Pinkfresh Studio Glacier jewels. Now, these jewels are ideal. I love them. I use them for everything because they have that AB tone to them, so they will shine and pick up the color of any card or any color card that you put this on. And you can see that the final effects or the final look of this card is just very colorful and beautiful, and I just love how that all turned out. Now, I'm going to show you a second card here pretty quickly. This is a mini Slimline, and I'm just showing you here that my stamp, if you've noticed this and you're a Pinkfresh fan, it doesn't quite fit in the well of your original MISTI. If you have a larger MISTI, go ahead and stamp to your heart's content. But this is just a little trick that I've picked up to stamp these larger stamps because that won't fit in the well of your MISTI. So I've basically taped down my MISTI with the hinge still movable, right? I'm not taping down the hinge. And the hinge now becomes the door, but on the opposite side. So I've kind of taped down my piece of white cardstock, and now I'm using that hinge on the opposite side to stamp down this larger stamp. And this works perfectly fine. So you'll see I'm going to stamp this up again. And I'm going to do some double stamping here, and I'm going to show you that if you do this carefully and don't move that MISTI, that's why it's taped down, it'll stamp perfectly every time. And this is just my little trick that I actually picked up from Pinkfresh Studio for stamping out their larger images. Now I went ahead and added ink to that daisy frame using the Skylight and Rose Petals ink from the same Catherine Pooler Zen Garden ink set. And now I'm going to move on to these frames. So this is the mini Slimline builder set here. And this is very ideal for building up backgrounds on your cards. So I used 3 of the rectangles, and this has like the little diagonal stitches. I cut the larger and the smaller rectangle with the stitches out of white, and then just a plain rectangle out of some beige cardstock. Then I used the circles and cut out kind of a circle frame with a bit of a detail piece there with some white cardstock and some gold mirror cardstock. And then again, I also cut out some more of those curvy leaves out of some vellum. Now, these are the 2 pieces, so the two ends of the frames that I kind of just cut off that I'm going to use here. The other 2 pieces you could save and use for something else. And I've got those Best Wishes die and plate, and I actually foiled those with some Spellbinders gold foil. And once I foiled that and cut it out, I decided I was ready to put this card together. So I'm adding that first plain rectangle on the stitched rectangle with some foam squares. The third rectangle I'm just going to add with some Tombow tape runner here, because I've already got a bit of dimension with the foam from the first layer. Then once that's all good and done, I'm going to go ahead and put together those 2 circle frames. So I'm going to attach the white on top of the gold in a bit of an offset fashion to create a bit of a shadow, so that gold kind of just peeps through just a little bit and creates just like a nice little accent to the center there. So once those are glued down, I will then glue them right down to the background in the center. So now that I've kind of found the center of the card, I'm going to take the 2 floral pieces from that stenciled daisy set, and I'm going to add them to the top and bottom. So I kind of cut off the extra white that's on the top and the bottom, and I used a few pieces of foam squares to adhere them to this background here. So I'll cut off all the edges, and you can see it creates a nice little top and bottom border here, which looks very nice with this card. I'll go ahead and attach that sentiment with some more foam square pieces, and then just to add a bit more interest, I'll add those curvy leaves. As I said, these work with any card, and they really just add that little bit of interest and little bit of delicate flowery, wispy, like magical type look. I love how these look with cards. And as you can see, I'm attaching only the ends so that the leafy portions kind of stick up and they create a bit of a 3D element. Not that I don't have enough 3D on this card, but it just adds that little bit more. So now I'll go ahead and attach it to a card base, which I made specifically for this background. And that just looks stunning. Now, just to add a bit more interest, I'll go ahead and add those Pinkfresh Studio Glacier jewels on top. And I'll just add a few here and there just for a bit of sparkle. And if you look at my stenciling, you'll see that I actually kept the centers of the daisies white. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to use my diamond stickles to kind of color those in and make those a little flashy as well and make sure they kind of shine in the light there. So that's my second card for you, and I really just wanted to show you here that even though this set is a slimline floral frame, you can cut it up and use it to make any sized card that you would like. So I hope that you guys enjoyed my video today. I hope you've been inspired to create something yourselves. Don't forget that all of these products are available in the shop and linked below. And don't forget to subscribe to the ScrapbookPal YouTube channel. I hope to see you guys next time, and have a great day.